Of course, yesterday was Remembrance Day. I hope you had the moment to pause at 11 a.m. or otherwise, like myself, pay attention to the sheer number of Australians that have served their country since Australia had an Air Force, an Army and, of course, a Navy. I was checking the stats from the census back in 2021, so these are the latest numbers we have. Did you know 581,139 people who are living amongst us today have served or did serve? Obviously, the number is a great deal more over the decades and more than a century, of course, since the formation of Australia as the modern country it was in 1901. Of those, more than 100,000 lost their lives. We commemorate them on two significant days in Australia. One is the declared public holiday, that is ANZAC Day, where we focus in particularly on the efforts in World War I. Remembrance Day is, of course, the end of the Great War that was supposed to end all wars. But as we know, the Second World War and multiple skirmishes or outright conflicts Australians have been involved with in the many decades since. But the reason for pause is that 103,000 people have lost their lives for this country. Now, these were people who chose to join or were forced to join by their government, but their deaths are all equally important. From the Middle East all the way through to back in the Middle East in Iraq and Afghanistan, from East Timor to training incidents which have happened here in Australia. For obvious reasons, we pause, we don't forget. And at the ceremonies that were taking place all around the country, the people who are part of that, more than 500,000 who are among us, who have served, either currently, recently, or a long time ago, they all pause. They wear the uniform to remember their mates. They wear the medals to remember their service. We pause to thank them. And as easy it is to say that we will remember them, the reality is that do we remember what they fought for? This is obviously a theme we'll get to in a moment's time. But to any and everyone who has got somebody in the Australian Defence Force that is currently serving, strength and love to you, to anyone who has served their country, my eternal thanks. I never take for granted that I'm able to exercise the ultimate free speech, that is to speak my mind as loudly as I do each and every evening, because the threats to such a country have been repelled by previous generations. I can't help but think what the generations that have fought for this country, died for this country, and still live amongst us as those that have served for the country feel about where we are right now, particularly after World War II. Sadly, as the days roll on, the further we get away from the physical connection to our parents or grandparents or the people we knew who served in World War II. Of course, World War II was a direct assault on Australia, with the Japanese bombing Darwin. And what I'm sure to this day still rankles some, Australia was at one point considering that if the Japanese did land in the north, well, we would retreat back to the base of Queensland, the Queensland line all the way across the country, and we would fight as we got closer to the more populous parts and the south of the country. But again, after World War II, our suburbs were changed forever with war service housing. That's my experience when my grandparents lived in areas where the streets were literally named after the battles or the generals or the VC recipients. As these people got together and formed their local RSL branches, formed their local churches, formed their local Apex, Rotary or you name it, social clubs, the people who met in bowling clubs, and people who created modern suburban Australia. I am a creature of suburban Australia. Suburban Australia with direct links to the family members who serve in Vietnam and the direct links to those who served and suffered out of World War II. The people who were part of the Australian Women's Land Army, the people who flew bombers and the other side of the world. So my sense of self is directly linked to the suburbs that the greatest generation created. The suburbs that are now slowly being subdivided, sold off to the highest bidder, or turned into unit blocks. It's why we talk about population being a continual change in our country and not always one for the better. The reality is that countries will always grow, they'll always change, and you're not going to have the same housing of the 1950s, 60s, 70s and 80s all the way into the 21st century. But the ideals, the ideas, what you fight for, what you believe in and what you believe community to be is something that we cannot let pass with time. We will remember them is not just something that's drilled into you as a kid to say twice a year. It should be an ethos for what you take into the debates of where our country is and where it is going for all time. Because people died for us to have the freedom to have those debates. Those debates that are increasingly more dangerous to have, and even our government seeks to censor on the internet to this very day. I will always honour my grandparents specifically, my wonderful stepfather and everyone that I know from uncles and other family members who serve. I thank you forever for it, and on this program we will always try to view the future of this country through the lens of sacrifice that you gave. That's why we say lest we forget. It's why we say we will remember them.